18. It's a number that might not mean much just sitting there on its own, but in the world of professional sports, an 18-year wait for a championship is, well, it's an absolute eternity. We're talking a whole generation of fans, a revolving door of superstar rosters, and just a massive mountain of psychological pressure that builds up with every single passing season. So let's dive right into this, because today we're looking at a sports season that was defined not just by this historic 18-year wait finally coming to an end, but by the absolutely unprecedented real-world chaos that literally almost canceled the entire tournament. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is arguably the wildest roller coaster narrative in the history of franchise cricket, the 2025 IPL season. We're going to break down the crisis, the triumph, and the aftermath. Part 1. The most chaotic season. The 18th edition actually kicked off totally normally back in March. But, as we'd soon find out, that normalcy was incredibly fragile, and it was about to hit an unprecedented roadblock. So fast forward to May 8th. The Punjab Kings are playing the Delhi Capitals at the beautiful stadium in Dharamshala. Punjab is having a really great game, right? They put up 122 for 1 in just over 10 overs. And then the floodlights just completely go out. But here's the thing. This wasn't some standard power grid failure. This blackout was actually triggered by a red alert and sudden air raid sirens in neighboring towns, literally just 90 kilometers away. Right then and there, this high-stakes, super glamorous sporting event is brought to a grinding, immediate halt by the stark, terrifying reality of military action and security threats. Which brings us to part 2, the mid-season crisis. Because that blackout, it was not an isolated incident. It forced the organizers into immediate emergency huddles as geopolitics crashed right into the world of sports. The sheer speed of how this all unraveled is just dizzying. On May 8th, as we just talked about, the match is suddenly halted and abandoned. By the very next day, May 9th, after consulting with the government about the conflict between India and Pakistan, the league takes the massive, unprecedented step of officially suspending the entire tournament temporarily. And then, incredibly, just 24 hours after that, on May 10th, a full and immediate ceasefire is announced between the two nations. I mean, just think about that. In the span of 3 days, this massive tournament went from a dead stop to an indefinite suspension to a sudden window of hope that they might actually resume. But listen, during that suspension on May 9th, the immediate priority wasn't cricket at all. It was safety. The personnel involved in that abandoned Dharamsala match, and we're talking international superstars, commentators, support staff, and a massive production crew, they all had to be emergency evacuated. With the local airport totally closed, everyone was loaded onto a specially arranged train to be ferried out to New Delhi. The juxtaposition here is just wild. You have some of the most famous, highly paid athletes in the world, guys totally used to luxury travel and glamorous stadiums, being rapidly evacuated on a special train while air raid alerts are literally looming in the background. It was a very real, very sobering collision of real-world geopolitics and franchise sports. Part 3. 18 years of waiting. Thankfully, that May 10th ceasefire brought some much-needed stability. And on May 17th, the sport dramatically returned, shifting the entire tone of the season to one of pure, emotional release. And that brings us to the ultimate climax of this incredibly resilient season. The grand finale ended up being pushed back to June 3rd, against all odds. After navigating those crazy mid-season suspensions and massive schedule disruptions, Royal Challengers Bengaluru, RCB, faced off against the Punjab Kings. And wow, in a thrilling, high-octane match, RCB pulled off a 6-run victory. After 18 long years of waiting, they finally secured their maiden title. Now, you really cannot fully appreciate this 2025 triumph without understanding their tragic history. For years, these guys carried the absolute heartbreak of falling agonizingly short in the finals, specifically in 2009, 2011, and 2016. They always had the superstars, right? But they also carried this heavy baggage of failure into what became the most chaotic season ever. And yet, when it mattered most, they finally held their nerve. To truly grasp the deeply human element of this story, we really have to hear from Virat Kohli, a player who has literally been with RCD since day one. He said, "When you see from the outside, the almost champions, the ones that have come close but never really won the trophy, and for that pressure to build over so many years, man, that quote perfectly encapsulates the immense psychological burden on these players. It wasn't just about winning a cricket match anymore. It was about shedding this nearly 2-decade-old label of being the almost champions. It was about releasing just an unbelievable amount of pent-up stress." And honestly, that stress didn't vanish until the absolute final second. Kohli also shared this incredibly fascinating detail about the final over. He noted, knowing that the game is beyond them and then to wait for those last 3 balls was probably the toughest part of the night. Think about that for a second. Even when the mathematical probability of Punjab winning was practically zero, the agonizing tension was still right there. The fear of a rogue no ball, the ghosts of all those past failures, it made those final 3 guaranteed deliveries the most stressful part of the entire ordeal. It's just a brilliant insight into the mind of an elite athlete standing right at the precipice of a lifelong goal. Part 4. The financial fallout. Because beyond the romance of the sport and the big win, we have to look at the cold hard data and the actual business mechanics of a violently disrupted season. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this massive, staggering number, 20%. According to reports from Brand Finance, the league's overall ecosystem value plummeted by 20% this year. That is a massive financial hit. We're talking about the valuation dropping from $12 billion down to $9.6 billion. You simply cannot suspend a massive commercial enterprise, even temporarily, without facing some severe economic headwinds. So what exactly caused a multi-billion-dollar drop? Well, it's a mix of things. First, the geopolitical headwinds from Operation Sindoor and the resulting border conflicts created massive market uncertainty. Second, you have those mid-season venue changes. Moving games to entirely different cities totally disrupts local ticket sales, regional sponsorships, and just basic operational logistics. Third, the direct security concerns and the actual suspension of the league temporarily halted the entire commercial machine. And finally, because the tournament was pushed back into June, several key overseas players actually had to leave the league early for their own international duties, which of course affected team compositions and global viewership appeal. Yet despite the overall ecosystem dropping so significantly, the core franchise brands showed some really incredible resilience. The Mumbai Indians actually stayed on top as the most valuable brand at $108 million, relying on deep commercial partnerships and super loyal fans. But look right beneath them. Royal Challengers Bangalore surged to $105 million. Their brand value was heavily boosted by that historic, narrative-shifting championship win. And of course, the Chennai Super Kings remain an absolute titan at $93 million, retaining their massive brand strength and cultural resonance even during such a chaotic year. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this explainer. The 2025 season really gave us a bit of everything. A terrifying reminder of how vulnerable sports are to the real world, an inspiring tale of sporting redemption, and a really fascinating case study in sports economics. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Having survived sudden blackouts, train evacuations, and a 20% financial hit, how will this unprecedented season permanently alter the league's operations, its emergency protocols, and the mental resilience of these teams heading into 2026? It's a question that is absolutely going to define the future of franchise cricket. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the numbers and the narrative, and keep exploring to find out what happens next. 18.